Hey, this is Ryan from Android Police, and this is the Sony Xperia Tablet Z. There are a couple of interesting things going on with Sony's new tablet, so I thought I would give you a quick look. The first thing to note is that it's very, very thin. Only 6.9 millimeters thick, which is the thinnest tablet I am aware of. Additionally, it is only 495 grams, which is pretty light. It's a little over 100 grams lighter than the Nexus 10, for example. In addition to being very light, the balance of this tablet is very good. Sony calls this omni balance. That basically just means they engineered it in such a way that the weight is centered and distributed evenly. As a result, it's not really any problem to hold this tablet with one hand and walk around with it and use it with the other. That's pretty cool when you consider most 10-inch tablets tend to be kind of ungainly and awkward to hold. The Tablet Z is also very sturdy. It is water and dust resistant, so there's no flex, there's no give, everything seems to fit together really well. It's just a very nice piece of hardware to hold. Because of the water and dust resistant aspect, it has these port covers for the micro SD card, the USB port, and the headphone jack, which is up there. I'm not super into these covers. They're kind of they're difficult to open. There's a little catch on the back here. It's always hard to get open. There we go. And when you open it, you can probably see this door is just hanging from this little plastic tab, and I worry that over time, as you open this to charge it and you close it, that this little bit of plastic might break. And if that happens, I think that this waterproof, water-resistant tablet instantly ceases to be water-resistant. I mean, if that breaks off, I don't know that it'll seal up properly at all. I've gotten this thing wet a couple of times. I submerged it, and it still works fine. So I guess on that count, Sony is not lying. Now the screen is of course 10.1 inches. It is 1920 by 1200, which was a little bit of a concern at first because it's a lower resolution than the Nexus 10 has, for example. And I actually don't think that there's any serious problem with that. After using the tablet for a while, I think it looks fine. Text is crisp. The black levels are good. I think at any distance that you're realistically going to hold this tablet, it's not going to be any sort of real concern. If you stick your face right up next to it, you can see the pixels. It doesn't look as crisp as some displays, but I don't think you're going to be disappointed with it either. I mean, so overall, I like the hardware. It's the most comfortable 10-inch tablet that I've ever used. So the software is good. I don't like it as much as I like the hardware. I'm not as keen on what Sony's doing here. It's based on Android 4.1.2, and Sony hasn't done a lot to change it. Most of the changes are superficial. So I've loaded up the home screen with a bunch of widgets to sort of to try to slow it down. Inside this device has a Snapdragon S4 Pro and 2 gigs of RAM. It's actually very similar to the Xperia Z smartphone. There's a little hitch every now and then, but overall performance has been pretty smooth. You can probably tell that Sony used the old-style Android UI. So you've got your navigation buttons over here, and notifications are over here. I've never been a huge fan of this layout because there's so much reaching around the screen. You know, your app drawer is up here, and then search is way up there. And Sony did something strange with the way widgets are placed. Instead of being in the drawer, you access them with a long press, and the widgets are right here. It's still a visual list, so that's okay. But you can also get to that by pinching or by hitting the plus button up there in the corner. I don't know why all three of these actions need to do the same thing. it's actually kind of a waste that pinch gesture doesn't do something more useful. So, I don't know. I mean, it works okay. Now, Sony did, however, leave the settings completely stock. They just added a few extra things on top. Like if you go into power management, you can see you've got the standby time listed up here and the battery saver modes that presumably will give you much better standby time. But the standard Android battery menu is still in there. Now, strangely, Sony did sort of add every app they have for an Android device, which isn't really very good. For example, there's this Play Now store. This is an alternative content store. It's got apps and sounds and images in it, but it's extremely laggy. And I mean, the selection is not really of any interest, I think, to anyone. This is just one example of a couple of things that Sony included on the Tablet Z that I don't think should be there, and it shows a lack of polish when you've got your new tablet and you start opening the included apps, and some of them are this. That's just not a good impression. Well, I might not be a fan of that, but Sony included a couple of other content apps. There's Album and Movies. It's basically a dual app replacement for the Android Gallery. I'm not crazy about splitting that into two apps, but they're attractive. Have kind of a Windows Phone vibe. So those are fine. While I might not be a fan of all of the things Sony did, they did add some things I think are pretty cool. There are these floating widgets. I think Sony calls these small apps. I'm not sure, but there are a number of included ones, and then you can add your own. So there's a little floating browser that you can pull up, and I added this is the Google Plus widget, and of course, and these are all resizable. You can only have one up at a time, though. So another thing that Sony did that I think is pretty interesting is they added support for the DualShock 3. This is just a regular PlayStation controller that I just paired with the tablet, and it works well. If I hadn't died right there, it would work really well. But you get the idea. So it takes about 30 seconds for the controller to pair the first time, and then after that, all you have to do is hit the PlayStation button on the controller, and it'll connect right away. And I mean, I like this because, I mean, yeah, you can buy a Bluetooth controller for your tablet, but most of them aren't very good quality, and this is actually quite a lot better than you know, you can get pretty much anywhere else. Pardon me while I suck at this game. But yeah, so that's an example of another thing Sony did that I think was a good addition. So overall, the hardware is really great. The software is reasonably good. There are a couple things I don't quite get, but you know, if you ignore the sort of broken apps that Sony included, and even if you don't you know, dig the way they do the home screen, you can install something else. I mean, overall, I like the device. I think that it's the most comfortable tablet of this size that I've used, and I find myself reaching for it at times when I would have in the past picked up the Nexus 7 or my phone. So that's all I have got. Thanks for watching.